Hey there, my name is Yami. I am your Latina next door. Welcome back to Mi Casa. Today I'm sharing several Christmas look for less dupes that I think you'll enjoy.
You guys know I love wreath making, and this one that I saw on Pottery Barn's website really caught my eye. The large one of these is $149. So I thought I would take up the challenge and see if I can recreate it for much less. The first thing I did was pick up a grapevine wreath, and this one I picked up at Walmart, and I believe it was just under $5. This is the smaller one of the ones that they have in the craft section at Walmart. This one is the 12-inch size. Now, I also picked up these berry bushes from a Dollar Tree. They carry them every year. And as you saw already, I cut them up, making each stem one individual pick so that I can insert it around the wreath, as you can see, all the way around. And I left these stems pretty long, and I also spaced them out evenly before hot gluing them down, just so I knew exactly where I would place them. Now, keeping these stems long will actually create a much larger wreath if you do it this way, so you can get away with getting a smaller, more inexpensive grapevine wreath if you do this. Now, after you do your very first round of berries all around the perimeter, you're going to take your next set of berry picks and you're going to go around and do it in the center and kind of bring those berries in a little bit. You also want to insert them in between the picks that you have already put in your wreath. That way it starts filling in those spaces in between each pick, making the wreath fuller. Now, after you do that second row, you're going to go in and do your third row. And just like you did before, you're going to focus on putting those berries in between the second row berries. That way you fill in those spaces. Now you want these stems to be a little bit smaller so that you can get these a little bit more tight inside of the center of the wreath. Now, the original wreath had lots of different types of greenery, and I wasn't about to go all out and get different greenery specific to Christmas. I just basically looked in my stash and I found some of this greenery that was left over from my summer wreath that I had on my front door that I did earlier this year. So I just decided to go ahead and cut those up and start inserting them throughout. So again, another way you can save money is just by using whatever you have on hand, and it doesn't necessarily need to be greenery like pine needles for Christmas because your berries are already the festive, big, bright statement piece in your wreath. Everything else can just be supporting greenery. Now, the most important part here is to take that greenery and insert it in all of the areas that need a little bit more filler, and any gaps that you see, that's exactly where you want to place it. That way the wreath looks nice and full and of course have that high-end look. Now, after I started adding my greenery, I decided to go ahead and use the rest of my berry bushes. I ended up using a total of 14. And then finally, and just because I found them in my stash, I had these fern stems that I decided to go ahead and place them in there. And then right before I was about to wrap up, I did find some pine cones that I had left over from my fall decor, and I decided to go ahead and use those instead because of course they are still festive for the season, and the original also had some pine cones in it. Now, this step here is optional. However, I do think it's what takes the wreath to the next level. If you've ever used any of these berries from Dollar Tree, you know that they tend to pop off and you get a lot of white foam poking through. So in order to hide all of that, I took some simple red paint and just began touching up those areas where the foam was exposed. All I did was go around the entire wreath, looking at different angles so I can spot the different little areas that needed to be touched up, and that was it. Now let's see how this wreath turned out. All right, so let's see how we did. The original wreath was $149, and even though it's a little bit bigger than mine, mine did end up being about 2 feet wide, which is a good size wreath. The only thing I had to pay for was the grapevine wreath form and the berries. Everything else I had on hand. So I only ended up spending $22.50 recreating this look.
If you're enjoying this video, make sure you check out my recent DIY ornament video where I share several ways you can create unique ornaments for your Christmas tree this year. All right, back to the video.
All right, so I don't know about you, but I have a tough time deciding on tree toppers because I don't like any of them. And sometimes I don't even put any of them on my trees. I'm guilty of that. But I did see this one on Ballard Design's website and I absolutely fell in love. And of course, even on sale for $79, it was still too much. But I knew exactly where to go to get exactly what I needed to recreate this look. So off to my local Dollar Tree I went and I found me one of these little cones. And you've seen these around, they come around every single year. And I picked up two of these mirrors from their home decor section. Now this one's going to be super easy and super quick. I mean, they're already gold, so there's no painting involved. So the first thing we're going to do is unwrap this Christmas tree because we need the frame that's underneath. This is what you're going to end up with, and the best part is that it's already dark green, so it's going to blend in nicely with all of those pine needles. You're also going to have to cut it down because you do want it to fit inside of that mirror, and I'll show you what I mean. Now you're going to want to place it on top of your sunburst mirror. However, here I can see that it's not going to fit quite yet, so I'm cutting it down a little bit more, trying to get it as close as possible to the end of the inside of one of the starbursts, as you can see right here. I want it to lay just inside the top as well as the bottom. So I'm cutting off those end pieces, and what I'll end up with is four little pegs on that bottom little section, and that is the perfect length. And next, you want to take a good amount of hot glue and you want to glue this onto the inside of that starburst. And I apologize for my camera. For some reason, it kept going in and out of focus in a couple of these sections, and I had no idea until after I saw the footage. But as you can see here, I am laying it inside of the starburst and I'm adding a ton of hot glue. Now, if you want to add a little bit of E6000 in order to make it a little bit of a stronger hold, you are welcome to do so. Now, the original tree topper was only one-sided, but I wanted mine to be double-sided. So if it's in like a center of a room and you want to see your tree from behind, you have a sunburst on both sides. Plus, it was really easy to put together as well as inexpensive, and it worked so well. Now, I did hold it for a bit while it was drying, and I kept adding hot glue where I thought I would need a little bit more support. And I just was patient with it and let it dry and become sturdy. And here is how it turned out. All right, here is how we did. The original cost $79.20, and mine only cost $3.75 because I only use three items from Dollar Tree. And what's even better is that mine is two-sided. This was so easy, and I love how it turned out. And I mean, that's a huge savings. Now, even though I just did an ornament DIY video, I do want to share this idea. Now, these are called ornament fillers on Ballard Design's website, but they look like ornaments to me and they can totally function as it. Now, I love the beautiful white with the gold peeking through the surface, but at $15 each, it was a little bit of a stretch. And honestly, all you need is some very inexpensive ornaments or some leftover ornaments in your stash that you wish to update. I found this box for $3 at my local dollar store, so I decided to have some fun. And for this, I'm just going to use some inexpensive Waverly chalk paint from Walmart. And I am just going to paint them all over. This paint covers pretty well, but I did give it two coats to make sure I covered the gold. And I did try this on two different kinds of ornaments just because I wanted to see how it worked out with these different patterns. Now, what you do need to keep in mind in order to do this, you will need ornaments that have raised surface patterns like this. Now I let those dry completely before I move to the next step. And what's funny is that I thought I was going to be able to go over this with like a damp cloth and remove the white paint to expose the original gold color underneath. However, this paint was not moving. It was not budging. It stuck onto those ornaments and did not want to come off. So the next best thing was to use rub and buff, and I just put some on my finger and lightly rubbed it all over the surface, focusing on those raised areas so that I can bring out the pattern. Now, you don't have to apply this absolutely perfect. If you do rub some rub and buff on other areas of the ornament, know that it is perfectly fine and it will actually give it a more vintage look. Here is how they turned out. All right, let's see how we did. For these ornaments, if I would have only purchased two, I would be paying $30.40. I paid $3 for a box of eight. And while I didn't do the other ones, I still can. And it's less than $3 for four of them. And imagine you can do this with any color paint you want and just customize your decor this year by doing this simple step. Now for my final Lacrylis dupe, I'm going to be recreating these Valor Designs flocked glass tabletop trees, and they're a very velvety surface, and they're also have like this little flocking to them slightly, and they range from anywhere between $19 all the way up to 31 a piece. But I figured we can recreate this for so much less. Now, I went to my local Dollar General and I happened to come across these. The tall one is only $5, the medium ones are 3, and the little one is 1. And they actually are very cute looking trees. However, they do look plastic in person. So I decided to use these in order to recreate these trees. And I thought they were just perfect. So I took some red and I just began applying it throughout the entire surface of the large one. Now, this is same Waverly chalk paint, and I do think it does make a difference to use chalk paint in this occasion. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to give it a couple of coats. As a matter of fact, I think I did 3 coats total. And here you see me applying a second coat. I really didn't want any of that silver to poke through the finish. Now I did let this dry completely after the second coat. I wanted to make sure I had a nice bond on that plastic surface. I did the same thing to the two medium ones. And for the medium ones, I decided to go with a nice sage color. I just thought it would be so pretty. This one was a little bit trickier because the surface on these were a little bit more complex, so I had to make sure I got all those nooks and crannies. Now, after the final coat was dry, I came back in and did another wet coat this time. And then on that wet coat, I added baking soda and I put it through like a strainer or a sifter, and I began to kind of just sprinkle it on top, and then any extra that would fall on the table I'd pick back up and sprinkle right over. And you want to make sure you do this while the paint is still wet because you want it to adhere to the paint, and this is going to give you like that velvety textured surface with that little bit of flocking throughout. Now you want to be generous with this and you just want to get as much surface area as possible covered with that flocking so that you get the most amount of baking soda that adheres. I do, however, give it a few taps before setting it aside. That way I can knock off anything that's too loose on the surface. All right, then it was up to removing the excess baking soda. I did this 2 different ways. For the red one, because I was still trying to figure out how I wanted to do it, I actually did this while the paint was still a little damp. And what I realized is that some of the paint would kind of rub off onto the baking soda bits, and it actually gave it a much better texture than I thought. And I could even reach down with the foam brush and add more to it, and it would stick on a little bit better, in my opinion. For the green ones, I actually waited till it was completely dry before knocking off the excess baking soda. And what I noticed is that sometimes there would be patches where it would look like it didn't really have much baking soda at all. So if I were to do this again, I would have them all be a little bit tacky to the touch while I'm removing the baking soda. Again, I can add on some more at the time because it's still tacky, and for some reason it would just feel better and look better, and I just like the overall finish, so just keep that in mind. Either way, as you can see here in this close-up, you can still feel and see the velvety texture as well as the flocking throughout. So again, either way is fine. It's just what you prefer in the end. And I just think this gives it such a beautiful texture. Now, once you're done removing the baking soda, that's all you have to do. Here is how they turned out. All right, let's see how we did on this last one. If I would have bought one large, two medium, and one small one of the original, it would have been $96.80. Now, as for me, I only paid $15, and that was for the trees and some red paint as well as some beige paint for the little Christmas tree. Everything else I had on hand. That is a huge savings for the same look.
Well, that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to give this video a thumbs up and let me know in the comments below which one of these was your favorite. I'll be back here with another DIY video very soon, so make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss out. I hope you guys are doing well, and I will see you back here soon. Until then, adios!